We got a great remake today. Kaskade, Deadmau5, Kx5, Escape is going to be the track. Before we hop into it, for those who don't know who I am, my name is Zach Edward. I'm a teacher at Cosmic Academy. Cosmic Academy is an artist development program. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've worked with about 500 other artists. They've signed to some of the biggest labels like Spinnin, Toolrom, Armada, Anjuna. They play some of the biggest shows and festivals like EDC, Ultra. And the one thing we care about are results, getting them results. And now we are here to also get you some results. So let me show you how I made this track. Hopefully we'll learn a thing or two. Let's dive in. Okay, before I break down how to make all of these sounds, let me show you how the final product came out. I think it sounds pretty good. Now that you've heard, let's get into it. Let me show you how this was actually created. And what I would recommend as I'm showing you this stuff, feel free to pause it, screenshot, copy these settings, remake these sounds. I really think they're valuable to have in your own library. So feel free to take whatever you'd like to take from this video. Now, first off with the drums, nothing crazy going on here. Let me just play it for you. Pretty basic. So let's hop to the bass line. Let's bring that into the picture now as well. If you're on a phone right now, you're probably not going to hear much of this, but basically what we have for the bass line is a simple saw wave filtered down. So all we're really trying to create is that low end rumble. One of the nice things about a saw wave is it does give us the overtone. So if I turn off the filter inside the synth and I turn off the filter on the EQ, right, we get all these overtones, which are going to be nice when we're trying to fit this sub into the mid bass layers that might sit on top. So went with the sub here, but really just playing along with the main lead, filtering out some of that high end because you're going to see we have another layer that's going to kind of sit on top of this one. Nothing going on in the effects panel. This is literally just a basic saw wave. Doing a tiny bit of compression. And some sidechain. Now, one of the things I do like to do with my sub bass for sidechain is I will zoom in and just make sure for the most part that each kick is staying clear of my sub. So if you notice, this front line is in line with this first kick. This next kick on the downbeat is in line with the tail end of the plugin, and notice how my sidechain is perfectly ducking around the length of this kick. So cool little tip you could always do. Let's continue to build bottom to top, and we'll look at these chords that sit right above the sub bass layer. So let me play them for you, then we'll look at how they were made. Some basic triads, and as far as the patch goes, it doesn't get more basic than this. So oscillator B isn't even being used. You can see the level is turned all the way down. So it's really just one oscillator that I ended up going with. As far as the processing goes, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of multiband. Kind of thickens it and flattens it at the same time. Also just taking advantage of the filter to roll off some of the high end. Now, looking at the other processing on here, I did a tiny bit of RC20 just to get some of that pitch wobble. Super, super minor. Barely going to notice this. Kind of gives some more of that detune sound to it. Next is just an EQ, really getting rid of a lot. So let me play this with the sub underneath as well as the other drums. And what you'll notice is this kind of sits right on top of that sub bass in mono. Cool, so let's jump to probably the most important layer of the entire project, and that is the subscribe button. If you are not already subscribed, be sure to click that button now so you don't miss our future videos. While you're at it, smash the like if you've already enjoyed what I've shown you, and I still have the best to come. So let's jump into the chord pluck. This really is one of the more important layers. I'm going to play it for you. Same chords as above. Obviously, these have a little more rhythm to it. With the patch, again, simplicity. We're dealing with a saw wave and a pulse wave. Don't forget, you could pause this, screenshot it, copy the settings. I'm not going to repeat the numbers. I always think that's kind of stupid. As far as the oscillators go, though, you'll notice they're an octave apart. We also have a saw wave and a pulse wave. Let me show you what the pulse wave adds to this. So for your own sound design purposes, like that's a cool little thing you can add in. You could have more of, you could have less of, you could have moments where that comes up. You could do things with an LFO on there, a lot of options, but you hear what it brings to the table. Now, as far as some of the cooler things going on in this patch, first off, this sound is really made from this secondary envelope that's on the filter cutoff. Our amp envelope is much longer. It's held out. It's more open sounding. I'm going to show you why in a second. Where envelope 2 is very short and plucky, much shorter decay time, no sustain, giving it that bump, 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 that quick little smack. Now, why we have a longer envelope and a bigger shape for envelope 1, which is the amp envelope, I am automating this filter cutoff to open and close throughout the performance. So in the background here, you'll notice this is our filter cutoff and it opens and closes, opens and closes. And watch what this does in terms of the feeling. So this is more now the performance of the sound is what's going on. And the cool thing is by having envelope 2 be a little bit tighter, I get this nice short pluck when the cutoff is turned down. But as it starts to open up, you hear it lengthen, get longer and bigger, and that's because envelope 1 is shaped to be a little bit bigger. So as I jump between these two, you kind of get two completely different shapes, and that's what's giving it that feel. As I open things up, it sounds like it's swelling. That reflects envelope 1. On the effects tab, literally nothing. So here is majority of what's going on. As far as some of the other processing goes, I have this Neural Q, which was a plugin I got for free this week, doing a little bit of color, some minor low end and high end attention, as well as some mid-side EQ. So rolling out everything below this 100 Hertz on the sides, don't need that, as well as boosting some of the side information just to make it perceived to be a little bit wider. In the mids, cutting above the sub and really just dipping out some of this area, which did not sound too pleasant. Some transient designer, some multiband sidechain. You can see I got the two shapes, the lower shape pumping deeper, higher shape much quicker. And all together, we sound like this. Jumping one below to our main lead, this is the ear candy. Okay, so dealing with Serum one more time, and I'm just using this because I assume most people have it. For this patch, we're dealing with two oscillators. We have a saw wave and a tri-saw, playing the same octave, slightly detuned from one another with the fine tune. Also notice that the saw wave is a little bit louder than the tri-saw. Fucked around with the phase just to kind of get the sound I was going for, but you could kind of move that around. You'll hear there's little variations of what it sounds like, trying to just find a sweet spot. As far as the envelopes go, envelope 1 and 2 are both very similar, very short shape, low decay, no sustain. We want this to be a nice tight pluck. But as you can see, I do have on envelope 2. We have it on the cutoff again, creating that sort of pluck. Now here's the important part of this sound. It's this velocity over here. So I have the velocity dragged onto my filter cutoff. And what this means is if I adjust the velocity within my notes here, and you could see it here at the bottom, that's what these are. It's the velocity as well as the colors, the different shades in here. What this means is if I have a higher velocity, it's going to open the filter further. So I can accent certain notes by having the filter pop open more than some of the previous notes. And that's how you get this sort of bouncy feel on the lead. See how like this note jumps out, this note jumps out, this one jumps out, where all of the lower velocity ones wouldn't do so. Like watch what happens if I just bring them all down. Constant, right? But what happens if I randomly turn some of these up? It gives you that cool back and forth because it's opening the filter more. So once again, in order to set that up, it's dragging the velocity onto this filter cutoff. Now on the effects tab with this patch, just a little bit of distortion. Again, you can see I love the serum distortion. In this one, I'm using the tube setting, kind of hefty amount of drive with the mix at about 50%. And once again, some light compression. This is a really dynamic sound, so I'm just trying to create some consistency with it. Getting to the post-processing, tiny bit of compression using the MC77. This is an FET compressor. Doing a bit of EQ, boosting the highs, taking out some of the low end. If we jump to RC20, once again, tiny little bit of the wobble, creating some imperfections on the pitch. Hopping over to Saturn now. Super, super subtle here. I mean, it's barely doing anything. Little bit of saturation on this one. Using the subtle tape, you can see I am using multiband. On the higher band, warm tube. And on this one, I'm 100% wet on the mix. On the higher band, I'm at 50%. I love almost like overdoing the saturation and then dialing back on the mix. See how that's audible. You could hear it. So finding like what the sound is going to be of that distortion, kind of getting what's that texture, what am I going to be listening for, and then just dialing back on the mix. Some sidechain. This was a late addition. I put in a little bit of some chorus effect, like a parallel chorus. You can see that adds a little bit of the stereo characteristic to it. It still had a pretty good mono translation when I checked, so not the end of the world on that one. Finally, just a bit of EQ to clean up some of the bookends, bottom and top. You can see a little bit of a boost here, around 1K, but nothing crazy on the shape. I am going to add some reverb, so I do have a send and return set up with a delay and reverb. And now that's your reverb. Here is my delay. Okay, the last little bit are just these atmospheres. Now, I'm sure they did something with the vocal or whatever they found. I'm not going to find the exact same atmosphere, but there was definitely this like lingering ambience throughout the whole mix. So I tried my best to find some shit in key that can work. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. This one's got a little bit of an auto pan to it, moving around. With this one, what I'm doing is basic sidechain on the first one, And on the second one, the beat is set to half note length. So it's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It kind of creates that emphasis like that. You'll hear it. Just adds a little bit of dynamics to the sound, so it's not just a constant blanket of atmosphere. Let's play it back one more time so we could hear it all. So I hope that was helpful. Thought it came out pretty close. Obviously a really, really good song. The writing is what makes this track. It's an incredible song. But hopefully you'll learn something with the sounds. I think this once again reiterates simplicity, how basic some of these sounds are, but the writing is fantastic. The positioning of where these sounds sit is meticulous. Everything has its own space, not just in the spectrum, but also in the stereo field. Really cool stuff. So I hope you found some value in this one. If you haven't already, hit that like button. We have plenty more videos coming, so I will catch you in the next one. See ya.